She's the ghost they whisper about, the sniper who moves like water, striking unseen and vanishing without a trace. From icy canals in Oregon to deadly compounds overseas, one woman alone has saved dozens of lives in missions no one else could survive. The voice came through my earpiece, urgent and clipped. "Where's the shooter?" the team leader demanded, tension thick enough to taste. Another round cracked the night, striking hard against the mud walls of the courtyard. My point man had gone down. No one could see the sniper. I was hidden, submerged in the canal that wound through the outskirts of Lakewood, Oregon. 3 hours I'd been here, lying in the water, so still it was as if I had become part of it. The chill bit through my wet suit, but my rebreather kept my air supply silent. My rifle, wrapped in a waterproof case, rested beside me, a lifeline as faithful as any. The insurgent believed he was untouchable. Perched nearly 900 meters away, he thought the SEAL team had no answer. He didn't hear my round before it shattered his world. But the team did. The whisper over comms was soft, almost reverent. Target down. Ghost 312 out. Half a year they'd traded stories about Ghost 312, the phantom sniper who intervened when all else failed. Now they were finding out the truth. And the truth about me always left jaws dropped. I surfaced briefly, letting the canal's current hide my outline, and watched as the point man's position was secured. Nobody had an idea that the same 27-year-old woman who had been their invisible shield all along had just saved a platoon of America's elite warriors. By the time I returned to Fort Cascadia, Washington, I was back in my dress uniform, pinned heavy with awards that many soldiers would never glimpse. At 27, the lines of my face carried the weight of deployments across Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. I had been pulled from my post teaching at the Army Sniper Academy to attend a high-level briefing. As always, I reminded myself, the story of what I do isn't for anyone outside the inner circle. I entered the Joint Special Operations Command conference room, filled with commanders, operators, and team leaders who had seen everything but still weren't sure what to expect. Delta Force, SEAL Command, Green Beret officers, they all turned toward me, weighing if I was the answer they needed for a mission nobody else would touch. "Staff Sergeant Harper," General Lawson said, opening my file with a measured hand. 3 bronze stars with valor, a silver star pending, and a list of confirmed operations that stretched across 3 continents. But the folder didn't tell the full story. It never did. The operations that never existed on paper. The kills that prevented entire platoons from being wiped out. The reason they whispered about me as the River Shade. Ghost 312 was the call sign, but the legend went further. I thought back to where it all began, back on the Cayuse Reservation in eastern Oregon. My grandfather, a former Marine Force recon sniper from Vietnam, had taken me in after my parents died in a car crash. He taught me more than marksmanship. He taught me to read the land, to listen to the wind in the grass, to track a heartbeat until it disappeared beneath my own. He taught me the secrets of water. Rivers weren't obstacles, they were allies. Shields. Roads. Weapons. By 14, I could hold my breath for nearly 4 minutes, strike a running deer at 400 meters, and follow a man through dense forest without a single branch betraying my path. By 18, I enlisted in the Army, not the Marines, despite family tradition, because they guaranteed a slot in sniper school. My instructors at Fort Liberty swore they'd never seen a shot like mine. Not just accuracy, it was instinct, almost premonition, as though I could see the path of a bullet before it left the chamber. My reputation cemented during a second deployment in Afghanistan, attached to the 5th Ranger Battalion. I spent 9 hours half-submerged in a sewage-lined ditch, waiting for the perfect shot to eliminate a high-value target. My efforts saved lives and earned me a direct recommendation to join JSOC. Soon after, I was the youngest soldier admitted to their elite sniper program. But it was Operation Iron Tide in northern Syria that ignited the myth of the River Shade. I anchored myself in the Orontes River for 14 unbroken hours, watching over a Delta Force team fighting for survival. I eliminated 7 enemy combatants who had ambushed the unit. My longest confirmed shot that day was over 1,200 meters with a Remington MSRN. 338 Lapua Magnum, hand-loaded match rounds. Others scoffed, calling it impossible. I just did it. General Lawson finally closed my file, his eyes narrowing. "We have a situation," he said. "A rogue Afghan Special Forces commander has taken 30 American contractors in Curacan province. He's trained in our doctrine, knows our playbook." The words settled over me like a heavy fog. "He's already wiped out 2 SEAL teams we've sent," the Navy captain added. A hush fell. They needed someone who didn't fit the usual mold. Someone who could vanish. Someone like me. I spoke before anyone else could. "What's the water temperature in those canals?" The Delta Major snorted. 61 degrees in October. That's hypothermia waiting to happen. "I can last 4 to 5 hours," I replied evenly. "Enough to infiltrate, set up, and dismantle the command. Give me a 2-person support team, my MSR, and 12 hours prep. No helicopters, no breaches, no pitched fight." The captain's frown deepened. "The canals vary in depth. You risk exposure." "Then I'll move at night and settle in before dawn," I said. "The debris, the silt, they're cover if you know how to use them." "I do." Lawson leaned forward, his voice commanding and final. "The hostages include the Secretary of Defense's niece. We've been ordered to recover them in 72 hours. Failure isn't an option." "I don't fail, sir," I said. Ice in my veins. "I adapt. I finish." The Delta Major scoffed. "No woman has ever." I cut him off with a calm smile. "Training does. Patience does. Or would you rather send in another team to die?" Silence. Later, standing on the balcony, I watched the sunset spill over Fort Cascadia. My grandfather's voice echoed, one last lesson before cancer claimed him. "The river doesn't fight the rocks, child. It flows around, under, through. Be the river." I had been the river for over a decade, sliding through war zones, carrying death in my current. Always unseen, always felt. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister on the Cayuse reservation lit the screen, saw the news. "Be careful. Your nephew keeps asking when Aunt Harper is coming home." I smiled. My nephew was 8, the same age I had been when my grandfather first placed a rifle in my hands. I'd promised him I'd take him hunting this winter to pass along lessons older than me. But first, 30 lives had to make it home. The heavy conference room doors closed behind Master Sergeant Kincaid, and the weight of his presence filled the hallway. He was a seasoned Delta operator, calm in a storm where others panicked. I'd seen men like him crumble under chaos. Not him. His reputation preceded him, but so did his scrutiny. "I've read your file," he said, his voice measured. "That shot in Syria, 1,240 meters, that was a miracle. Not even the 338 usually hits that boundary." "Everything's impossible until someone does it," I replied, shrugging almost casually, though my fingers itched to be back on the range. The truth was simple. I trusted my training. I trusted the river. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Your support team. You move in 6 hours." Inside were their names, photos, and operational histories. 2 men, Sergeant First Class Ramirez, 32, Army Special Forces, methodical, precise, and Corporal Finn Hayes, 28, Navy SEAL, agile, and quick to improvise. Both had reputations that could stand on their own, but they were mine for the mission. My team. I spent the next 12 hours preparing. My rifle, a customized Remington MSR, received a final inspection. I hand-loaded rounds, matching every grain of powder to account for temperature, humidity, and wind. Even a minor miscalculation at 450 meters could be fatal, and I didn't gamble. The canals outside the city of Lakewood were the veins of this operation, twisting and turning through abandoned industrial zones and crumbling suburbs. Satellite images mapped their depths, 4 to 6 feet, silted, littered with debris. Perfect for someone who knew how to move like water. I memorized every bend, every obstruction, every shadow. Ramirez and Hayes were already in position at the overwatch point 1,600 meters from the compound. I could hear their voices crackle through the earpieces. "Harper, you copy?" Ramirez asked. "Loud and clear," I replied. My breath barely disturbed the water in the practice canal as I simulated the entry. Hypothermia would be a silent predator, but I had spent years training in colder conditions. My wetsuit was layered with thermal lining, my body adapted to the chill. By nightfall, I had submerged myself in the main canal, a mile and a half from the target compound. The current was stronger than anticipated, fed by upstream rainfall and melting snow from the Cascade foothills. Sometimes it pushed me faster than expected, other times it left me grinding against debris. Each adjustment, every stroke, was calculated. I flowed with the river, not against it. The hours ticked by slowly. My core temperature dropped steadily, but remained within tolerable limits. I could feel my muscles trembling, the cold seeping into bones and joints, but I welcomed it. It reminded me I was alive. I was aware. I was unseen. At the midpoint, I paused behind a cluster of floating debris, letting the water carry me silently. Ramirez's voice whispered in my ear, "Thermal sweep shows clean. You're good for the next leg." The next stretch was narrow, tangled with branches and industrial runoff. I held myself low, letting the darkness and silt hide my silhouette. Finhays adjusted my backup position and relayed updates on guard rotations. Every sound, every shift in movement, was cataloged in my mind. By the time I reached my final hide, 450 meters from the compound's central building, I had traced the rhythm of 30 guards, their patrols, and their blind spots. I settled into cover, a small pile of storm debris that created a natural concealment. From here, I could observe without being observed. My rifle rose above the water, clearing the optic. The river cradled me, shrouding me from sight. The compound itself was a fortress of concrete and steel, surrounded by canals and fields that had once grown wheat, but now lay fallow. Towers loomed, guard posts bristling with weapons, searchlights scanning the dark. Inside, 30 contractors, innocent Americans, waited for dawn. If I made a miscalculation, they would die. At 0400, movement inside the compound shifted. Kareem Dostan, the rogue commander, emerged from a building to pray, his body silhouetted against the first hints of dawn. My finger hovered on the trigger. I could take him, end this, but without knowing the hostage's location, it would be reckless. Cole's voice buzzed in my ear. Predator feed shows multiple thermal signatures northwest. Lower floor. Relief passed through me like fire. The hostages were alive. Then Dostan moved again, this time toward that exact building, followed by 2 guards carrying trays. 30 in total. Every detail confirmed. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of calculation: distance, wind, elevation, breathing rhythm. I had been training for this moment for years, and the water had taught me patience. I waited. The compound shifted as dawn crawled across the horizon. Guards rotated, footsteps echoing faintly on the concrete, unaware of the shadow flowing beneath the water. I counted each one, memorizing the rhythm of patrols, the angle of rifles, the sway of hips and shoulders. Every human movement was data, every blink of an IQ. Dostan stepped out again, this time clutching a video camera. My stomach nodded. He was about to film one of the contractors, a propaganda execution meant to terrify. My finger itched on the trigger, my breath synchronized with the rhythm drilled into me by years of training. Range. I whispered over the comm, 447 meters. Wind 6 mph, full value, Cole replied. The temperature of the water pressed against my skin, a slow creep of ice through veins, but I ignored it. My wet suit held me in a cocoon, my hands remained steady, trained by hundreds of hours spent in even colder currents. I inhaled. I exhaled. The first shot tore through the temporal lobe of the commander. Dostan dropped mid-sentence, the camera clattering to the ground. My second round hit the cameraman square in the chest. The third found a guard attempting to restrain the contractor. Chaos erupted inside the compound. The remaining guards scrambled, their coordination collapsing as quickly as their leader had fallen. My training took over. Bolt. Breathe. Squeeze. Cycle. Repeat. I chanted silently, the mantra of a sniper under fire. 5 more shots, each precise, each deadly. Cole's voice crackled. Delta and SEALs inbound. 3 minutes. I adjusted my aim to the basement-level windows. A guard raised his weapon to execute another contractor, and I cut him down before his finger could tighten on the trigger. 2 more guards, spotting the faint ripple of my muzzle, unleashed a volley toward the canal. The water swallowed the rounds, stripping them of energy before they could touch me. I let the current carry me 20 meters downstream, surfacing behind new cover. 2 quick, deliberate shots later, 2 more enemies were down. The roar of MH-60 Blackhawks tore across the night as Delta operators fast-roped into the compound. Seals secured the perimeter. The firefight lasted less than a minute. By then, I had accounted for 15 of the 24 guards before anyone else even touched dirt. The river carried me to the extraction point, muscles trembling from cold and exertion. Cole's hands gripped my arms as I staggered from the canal. My core temperature had plummeted to 91 degrees, deep hypothermia, but my mind remained razor-sharp. I shivered violently, but my eyes scanned, alert. "We're clear," Cole said. "Let's move." The air smelled of gunpowder and wet earth. My body felt like lead, but the river had done its work. Every lesson my grandfather had drilled into me replayed in my mind. Patience, observation, adaptation. I had been the river tonight. Flowing, striking, vanishing. Back at Fort Cascadia 6 weeks later, I stood in the conference room again, my new silver star pinned to my chest. The same men who had doubted my ability now rose to their feet, applauding. Even the Delta Major who had scoffed, who had questioned my capability, looked at me with a mixture of awe and respect. Lawson handed me an envelope. Inside, not only a check, but a note from the SEALs. "Ghost 312, we want you to teach our combat swimming course. Learn water like you do." I smiled, the corners of my mouth lifting just slightly. Teaching? That could wait. For now, I needed a river. The calm after the storm returned quickly. Later that evening, I found myself by a quiet river near the Fort Cascadia training grounds. My nephew's voice chirped over the phone. "Aunt Harper, when are you coming home?" "Next week, little warrior," I promised. "I'll teach you everything my grandfather taught me." I stared at the water, letting its flow carry the tension from my shoulders. The river remembers everything, child. It only shares its secrets with those who respect it. For now, the mission was done. But in the back of my mind, I knew the river always had another current waiting, another challenge, and another lesson. The debriefing room smelled of stale coffee and sweat, a mix that always seemed to cling to special operations spaces. The team filed in, rubbing sore muscles and adjusting gear, eyes flicking toward me with a mix of curiosity and respect. After what had happened in Curacan province, nothing needed to be said. The river had done its work, and we'd all survived because of it. Cole and Ramirez sat across from me, their faces still hardened by the adrenaline of the night. I could tell they were both replaying every second, every movement, every shot. They had watched me operate, but even so, I could see the disbelief lingering behind their professional facades. "You moved like a ghost," Cole said finally, voice low but steady. "Never seen someone disappear into water like that. The river, it's almost like you become part of it." I offered a faint smile. "You don't become part of it. You respect it. You let it do the work while you do yours." Ramirez leaned back, arms crossed. "We thought we'd lost you a couple of times in that canal. Your core temp was reading 91 when we pulled you out." "I'm fine," I said, shrugging. Hypothermia felt like a whisper, not a roar. Years of exposure, years of discipline. It didn't scare me. It reminded me I was alive and aware. The room went silent for a moment, and I took it in. The men who had once doubted me now recognized something they hadn't before. Precision isn't just about equipment or training. It's about patience, calculation, and intuition. Something that can't always be taught. Lawson stepped in then, the weight of command filling the room like a physical presence. He handed each of us folders detailing the success metrics, enemy losses, and hostage recovery timelines. 32 Americans brought home safely. The rogue commander neutralized. Propaganda operation foiled. Minimal friendly casualties. It was almost too perfect, like a story someone would tell around a campfire, but never truly believe. I let the information wash over me. For the outside world, this would become just another headline, a fleeting mention on the evening news. But for those of us in that room, it was proof that careful preparation, respect for the environment, and unwavering focus could defy expectations. Later, I found myself alone in the training hall, rifle in hand, inspecting each component again. The Remington MSR was clean, precise, and ready. My thoughts drifted to the river. It had been my shield, my guide, my confederate in the dark hours. Every ripple, every current had taught me patience. Every obstacle had reminded me that flowing around challenges was often more effective than crashing into them. I thought of my grandfather, the old lessons he had passed down in hushed tones by the fire. The river doesn't fight the rocks. It finds a way around, under, through. Be the river, Lena. I'd lived by that creed for over a decade, and it had saved lives again tonight. Finhays came up beside me quietly, his eyes scanning my work. "You ever sleep?" he asked. I glanced up, meeting his gaze. "When the river allows." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'll never understand you, Harper." "You don't need to," I replied. "You just need to follow me when it counts." The rest of the day passed in routine, equipment checks, mission reports, and cleanup. But even in the mundane, the current of tension never fully disappeared. Special operations is never done. There's always another mission, another threat, another lesson hidden beneath the surface. That evening, back in my quarters, I called my sister on the Cayuse reservation. My nephew's voice answered instantly, full of energy. "Aunt Harper, when are you coming home?" "Next week," I said, smiling despite my exhaustion. "I'll teach you everything my grandfather taught me." There was a pause. Then, with all the innocence of an 8-year-old, he asked, "Will you tell me about the river?" I let the line go silent for a moment, imagining the flowing water, the secret paths, the lessons it had carried me through. "The river remembers everything, child," I said finally. "But it only shares its secrets with those who respect it." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts drifted to the next mission, the one they would inevitably hand me. Because after tonight, I was no longer just Ghost 312. I was the river shade, the one who moved through water and darkness alike, the one the command turned to when every other option failed. Sleep came reluctantly, and when it did, it was shallow. Dreams of canals, currents, and shadowy movements followed me. The river never stopped flowing in my mind, never stopped teaching. And I knew, just as surely as the water would always find its path, I would be called again. I was halfway through my morning drills at the Sniper Academy when the call came in. The secure line flashed urgent red, and I knew before I answered that the message wasn't routine. "Harper, we need you in the command center." "Now," Cole's voice said. No pleasantries, no build-up, just the crisp tone of someone who had seen too many operations go sideways. I packed my kit quickly: rifle, optics, spare ammo, and a dry bag with thermal layers. By the time I reached the briefing room, Lawson, Cole, and a handful of Delta and SEAL commanders were already gathered, faces tense. The weight in the room pressed against me. "Harper," Lawson began without preamble, "we've got a high-value target in the Zarkov region. An arms broker with ties to multiple terrorist cells. He's holed up in a mountainous compound, heavily defended. Satellite imagery shows guard towers, tripwires, and several underground tunnels. The intelligence is solid. The problem: conventional teams have failed to breach the area. Casualties are high. That's why you're here." I listened, scanning the images projected on the large screen. The compound was tucked into a jagged ridge, surrounded by icy streams and cliffs. Any misstep would leave you exposed. Helicopters would be visible for miles. A frontal assault would be suicide. I let my eyes settle on the terrain, letting the rivers and streams in the satellite images form paths in my mind. A natural infiltration route, a way to flow under detection, to exploit the shadows as my grandfather had taught me. "How many operators have we lost?" I asked. "2 full SEAL squads," Cole replied, voice low. "Another attempt was aborted after 5 casualties in the first 30 minutes. I exhaled slowly. The challenge wasn't impossible, it was just precise. And precision was my ally. "Canals?" I asked, already visualizing my approach. "Streams feed into the northern edge. Icy, shallow in parts, fast currents," Lawson said. "Not ideal for long-distance concealment, but maybe you have ideas." I did. My mind traced paths through the waterways, noting eddies, overhangs, and debris. I could move unseen. I could flow like the river itself. "You'll take Ramirez and Hayes again. No other support. No extraction unless you call it," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "We'll infiltrate at night, approach under the cover of the streams, and establish overwatch inside the compound. The target moves frequently, but the routines are predictable if you watch closely." Lawson leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Time frame: 12 hours prep. Infiltration begins at 0200. Extraction depends on target location and guard movement. I need the streams mapped to the centimeter, every guard rotation logged, and thermal sweeps of underground tunnels." The room went silent, the weight of my plan settling in. Cole finally spoke. "Are you certain?" The streams are freezing. Currents unpredictable. Exposure is real. I've been in colder water, with less visibility, for longer periods, I said simply. We move like the river. Flow, adapt, strike, vanish. The maps and intelligence reports were spread out before us, and I began the meticulous work of planning. Entry points, currents, distances, line of sight angles, fallback positions. Every second counted. Every movement had to be accounted for. The river would be my guide, my shield, my invisible hand pushing me forward. Hours passed. Ramirez and Hayes reviewed my calculations, providing their observations. Every detail mattered. The depth at the bend of a stream, the sound of loose rocks underfoot, the timing of guard patrols. By nightfall, our plan was a living thing, a network of flowing paths that promised stealth, precision, and control. As I left the command center, my wet suit and gear ready for pre-mission testing, my thoughts drifted to the river back home, the one that had always taught me patience. The icy streams in Zarkov would not intimidate me. They were just water, flowing, shifting, hiding my movements. My advantage. Back in my quarters, I called my sister. My nephew answered immediately, excited and oblivious to the danger awaiting me. "Aunt Harper, are you coming home soon?" "Soon," I said, trying to hide the tension in my voice. "First, I have another river to navigate." He giggled. "Will it be cold?" "Yes, little warrior. But I know how to move through it." I hung up and began running through the drills in my head. Breath control, body position, aiming under currents. The enemy's compound loomed in my thoughts like a jagged puzzle. Every guard, every path, every shadow had to be accounted for. Night would come soon. The streams would be my corridors, the cliffs my walls, the darkness my ally. And once again, I would be the river's shade, moving unseen, striking unseen, and vanishing before anyone even knew I had been there. The moon hung low over the jagged peaks, casting silver light on the icy streams that fed the compound. I slipped into the water first, letting the current take me, flowing silently around rocks and fallen branches. Ramirez and Hayes followed at a distance, overwatch positions already mapped and agreed upon. The water was shockingly cold, biting at every exposed inch of skin. My wetsuit held, but it was a reminder that even the most prepared could falter. I slowed my movements, letting the river cradle me rather than fight it. Every stroke was deliberate, every breath controlled. 2 clicks to the first blind corner. I whispered into the mic. "Copy that," Ramirez responded, his thermal scope sweeping for signs of detection. "Path looks clean." I adjusted my goggles, watching the black water swirl around me. This was familiar territory, the lessons of rivers, currents, and patience ingrained over years. Flow around obstacles, use cover, vanish into darkness. Every movement calculated to be invisible. The compound's perimeter was littered with patrols, guard towers, and motion sensors. But water was my ally. The streams hid me, muffled my movements, and distorted any thermal signatures that might give me away. As I neared the first bend, a shadow flickered on the bank. I froze, letting the current carry me a few meters past before surfacing behind a boulder. Hayes' voice crackled softly. "Thermal sweep shows minor movement, likely a guard adjusting position. No visual." "Good," I whispered back. My pulse was steady despite the cold, despite the adrenaline. Focus was my weapon. The river guided me closer to the first objective, a lookout tower where Daston's inner circle had been spotted the night before. I climbed partially out of the water, letting my rifle clear the surface, scope trained on the tower. 2 guards rotated positions, oblivious to the shadow beneath the water. Breath held, body still, I calculated distances, wind, and the exact point to place each round. The first shot found the lead guard mid-step. The second struck the lookout who had been adjusting his binoculars. The tower was mine in less than 30 seconds. The remaining guards scrambled, confusion and panic spreading as the tower went silent. I melted back into the stream, letting the current erase any trace of my presence. "Tower secure," I whispered, moving to secondary perimeter. The next segment of the stream was narrower, forcing me to navigate carefully. Jagged rocks scraped my wetsuit, loose branches scraped my face, but I pressed on, using the environment to my advantage. Each bend brought me closer to the compound's inner structures, where the high-value target was likely to be. A faint light flickered ahead, flashlights from a patrol. I slowed, submerged myself deeper, letting the river's silt and shadow conceal me. Time slowed. One miscalculation, one ripple, and the mission would fail. Hayes whispered, "Path clear." 3 guards near the northern building. Thermal shows movement inside. I nodded silently, planning the next moves. This was the part that required patience. Strike too early, and the hostages could be exposed. Wait too long, and patrols would rotate, raising the risk. I became still, listening to the water, calculating the patterns, feeling the river's rhythm. By the time I reached the final bend, the building came into view. Windows were reinforced, doors guarded, but there was a ventilation shaft that ran beneath the structure. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. "The river doesn't fight the rocks, child. It flows under, around, through. Be the river." I mapped my entry point carefully. Ramirez and Hayes adjusted their positions on the Overwatch hill above. I gave them a faint signal. Ready. The ventilation shaft would take me inside, unseen and unheard. The current carried me gently to the entrance, where I paused, listening. No voices, no unexpected movement. I slid through the narrow opening, leaving the stream behind. Darkness swallowed me, but I was prepared. Every movement was calculated, every breath controlled, every sense heightened. Inside, the compound smelled of metal, oil, and fear. I moved silently down the corridor, marking doors, corners, and patrol routes. My team above was in position, ready to strike when I gave the signal. Every shadow, every sound, every shift of weight was a puzzle I was solving. And then, I heard it, the low murmur of a voice in the next room. American contractors, 32 of them, huddled and alive. My pulse steadied. The river had guided me here. Now, the hunt would begin. The corridor was silent except for the faint hum of ventilation and the distant murmur of voices from the room ahead. 32 Americans, alive and huddled, waiting. My pulse slowed, every muscle coiled for precision. The river had carried me here, and now I would move like it. Silent, flowing, lethal. I peered around the corner. 2 guards patrolled the hallway outside the room, rifles slung casually, unaware of the shadow waiting for them. I exhaled slowly, letting my breath sink with the rhythm of my movements. 1 shot at a time, 1 heartbeat at a time. The first round found the guard adjusting his rifle. He slumped silently against the wall, unseen, unheard. The second guard hadn't even turned when my bullet struck. Both dropped, leaving the corridor clear. I slipped into the room, low and careful. Contractors froze as I raised a hand in reassurance. "It's okay. Stay down. Follow my lead," I whispered. They nodded, terrified, but alive. My eyes scanned quickly, marking doors, corners, and remaining threats. Footsteps approached from the far side, more guards. I ducked behind a support beam, rifle ready. 3 rounds, 3 hearts stopped, and they fell without a sound. The contractors flinched, eyes wide. "Stay low. Move when I say," I whispered. My fingers worked quickly, unbolting doors and checking each space. Every guard taken down, every angle secured. The river had taught me patience, and patience now saved lives. Cole's voice crackled in my ear. "Target located. Thermal feed shows him near the armory. Minimal guard coverage on your side. You're clear for approach." I moved through the shadows like water through a narrow channel, approaching the inner building. Daston's second-in-command emerged from the armory, a rifle in hand. I didn't hesitate. 1 shot, precise, and he crumpled. The room was mine. The contractors followed quietly as I guided them toward the rear exit, marking each door, each hallway, each potential ambush. Tom was a predator. Every second brought risk. The river, the currents, the stealth, it was all part of the flow. "Cover me," I whispered into the comms. Ramirez and Hayes responded instantly, taking overwatch positions near the windows and stairwells. Their rounds were ready to intercept anyone attempting to pursue. Dastan appeared again, frantic, dragging a security officer toward the contractors. I adjusted my aim, calculated the distance, wind, and trajectory. 1 round, clean and lethal, and he dropped mid-step. The remaining guards scattered, disoriented, some running into the paths of Delta and SEAL Overwatch. I signaled the contractors forward, moving quickly but carefully. Every motion was deliberate, flowing with purpose. 25 meters to the rear exit, 20 guards between us and freedom. I counted each one, aimed, fired, and flowed again. The last guard at the exit saw me for a split second. Too late. One round, and he collapsed, rifle clattering to the floor. We were clear. Outside, the icy streams awaited, the current ready to conceal our movements. The contractors were guided into the water, moving silently, one by one. I followed, letting the river swallow us, carrying us away from danger. The night air stung our lungs, but the water carried our shadow. By the time extraction helicopters reached us, the river had already done its work. Every contractor alive, every threat neutralized, every pulse measured and controlled. My hands trembled from cold and exertion, but my mind was sharp, focused. Cole's voice came through, quiet but loaded with respect. "Harper, you did it again. 32 lives, 0 casualties on our side." I let the words wash over me, like water over stones. The river had guided me, protected me, and allowed me to strike with precision. Back at Fort Cascadia, my wetsuit hung wet in the drying room, and I sat quietly, letting the adrenaline fade. Ramirez and Hayes were beside me, quiet but smiling, respect evident even in their fatigue. "You ever get tired of being the river?" Hayes asked, voice low. "No," I said, watching the water dripping from the walls. "The river never tires." "Neither do I." That night, I called my sister again. My nephew answered, full of excitement. "Aunt Harper, did you save everyone?" "Yes, little warrior. Everyone's safe," I said, forcing a smile through chattering teeth. "And I'll teach you how to move like the river when I get home." The river outside my quarters whispered its approval, a silent confirmation that the flow had carried me once more through danger, through darkness, and into safety. The debriefing room smelled of damp gear and exhaustion, a mixture I had come to associate with success in special operations. The 32 contractors had been recovered, every threat neutralized, and yet the room was far from lighthearted. Each man and woman sitting across from me carried the weight of what could have gone wrong. I, too, felt the residue of the night, the cold water, the tense heartbeat of a perfect infiltration, the fleeting seconds where one miscalculation could have ended everything. Cole and Ramirez stood behind me, silent sentinels who had once doubted my limits and now seemed reluctant to voice it. Their respect was quiet but palpable. Lawson opened the briefing. "Harper, the operation exceeded expectations. Casualties, 0 friendly. Target eliminated. Contractors recovered. You did what no one else could." I nodded, letting the accolades pass over me like water over rocks. There was no pride in it. Precision was simply the job done well, the river teaching me patience and flow. The Delta Major who had once scoffed at my abilities approached, hesitating before speaking. "Harper, I owe you an apology. My brother, he was one of the contractors tonight. I thought you might fail." I met his eyes, calm, steady. No apology needed. I was trained for this. I adapted. We all survived. That's what matters. Later, I retreated to the quiet of my quarters. The wet suit was folded neatly, gear cleaned and stored, but the cold lingered in my bones. I sat by the window, watching the river outside, flowing with indifference and wisdom. It had carried me once again, and yet, in its silent currents, I felt the pulse of something I couldn't ignore, a new challenge, a new current waiting to be navigated. The mission was over, but the river never stopped. It whispered of lessons unlearned, of paths unseen, of dangers that could be met with the same patience and calculation that had guided me thus far. My phone buzzed, breaking the quiet. It was my sister. My nephew's voice answered instantly, excited and unfiltered by the realities of war. "Aunt Harper, are you coming home soon? Are you going to teach me?" "Yes, little warrior," I said, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. "But first, there are more rivers to learn from." Even as I spoke, my mind traced possibilities, future operations, unpredictable currents, the tactical calculus that would guide my next mission. I knew that once a river had carried you, it never truly released you. You remembered every bend, every stone, every rapid. And in the quiet hours, I remembered the lessons of my grandfather. Respect the river. Flow with it. Use it. The night stretched long and quiet, the river whispering beneath the bridge near my quarters. I thought about the contractors, the men and women I had guided through danger, and the unseen currents that had protected me from the same fate. I thought about the cold water, the long hours submerged, the silent calculations that had become second nature. And then I thought about my next challenge. Not a mission assigned by command, but a personal river, my nephew, my family, the lessons passed down from my grandfather. There was a life to be protected beyond the battlefield, a river that needed guidance, and a shadow in me that would continue to flow where danger dared to follow. Sleep came reluctantly, shallow and interrupted by the rhythm of my own heartbeat, the echo of water moving through channels I alone could see. The river shade rested, but not for long. I knew the next current was coming, and when it did, I would flow with it, vanish into it, and strike with precision once again. The morning fog hovered low over the river near Fort Cascadia, curling around the trees like smoke from a distant fire. I stood at the edge, boots sinking into mud, my rifle slung across my shoulder. The mission in Zarkov was complete, but the river had a new lesson waiting for me. It always did. Cole's voice came over the secure line. Harper, new intelligence. A rogue arms network has surfaced near the Cascade border. Operatives embedded in multiple villages. They've already captured 2 field agents. Satellite shows fortified compounds, rivers running cold and fast, and patrols that have adapted to conventional tactics. They know the flow, or think they do. I exhaled slowly, letting the mist settle around me. So they've learned the rivers, I said, almost to myself. Good. That means I need to be smarter than they imagine. Ramirez arrived moments later, gear in hand, eyes scanning the fog. Morning, river shade. Ready for another swim? He asked, half-smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I'm always ready, I replied, voice calm. The river doesn't wait for you to be ready. You learn to move with it, or you're left behind. We reviewed the maps and satellite feeds, plotting entry points, currents, and patrol rotations. This mission was different, less straightforward, more chaotic. Multiple compounds, hostile terrain, and rivers that shifted unpredictably with snowmelt and rain. My mind traced every bend, every silted pool, every overhanging branch, letting the waterways map themselves in my memory. Hayes joined us, nodding toward the maps. They've laid traps along the smaller tributaries. Mines, motion sensors, even tripwires. Whoever moves first will trigger them. Conventional approach is suicide. Then we won't move conventionally, I said, tracing the tributaries with my finger. We'll flow through the main river, under cover of night, using the natural current to hide every ripple. We'll strike inside the first compound before they know what hit them, then move upstream to the others. Timing and precision will be everything. Cole's voice was calm but firm. You'll have minimal support. Command wants plausible deniability if this fails. Your call, Harper. You ready to do it alone? I looked at the flowing water in front of me, the mist curling like the currents of the past missions. I don't do this alone, I said. I flow with the river, and it's always enough. The hours passed in preparation, customizing rounds, checking gear, visualizing every movement. I ran through thermal signatures, guard rotations, and potential ambush points until the patterns became second nature. By nightfall, the river was ready, and so was I. When the moon rose high, silver and cold, I slipped into the water. The current swallowed me, carrying me silently toward the first compound. My breathing was controlled, each stroke deliberate. The fog masked my silhouette, the water muffled my movements, and the darkness became my cloak. Halfway through, I paused behind a natural bend where the river widened into a shallow pool. The temperature was biting. One misstep and hypothermia would set in faster than I could react, but I had trained for this. I allowed the current to push me forward, merging with the flow, becoming part of the water itself. Ramirez and Hayes were in position above, Overwatch locked, eyes scanning for signs of danger. Every movement was a calculation. Every ripple, every shadow, every breath counted. Ahead, the first compound emerged, fortified and silent. Guards patrolled the walls, unaware of the river moving beneath them. I visualized the path, entry points, patrol gaps, hiding spots, escape routes. This was more complex than Zarkov, more dangerous, and yet the river had taught me patience and precision. I slid from the water, wetsuit clinging, rifle raised, and became the shadow moving toward the first target. The river had carried me this far. Now, I would strike, silent and precise, flowing through the chaos like water over stone. The next challenge awaited. I would meet it, as always, with the calm of the river and the resolve of someone who had learned to vanish, strike, and survive where others could not. The first compound lay before me, silent but alive with tension. The river had carried me under its cold, dark current, and now I moved through the shadows, rifle raised, senses alert. My wet suit clung, cold and heavy, but my mind was sharp, flowing like the water that had guided me here. I observed the patrols, memorizing their routines. 3 guards on the east wall, 2 near the entrances, 1 moving unpredictably around the north side. Every heartbeat of the compound was data, every sound a clue. I slid along the perimeter, merging with darkness, invisible and precise. Target building secure for entry. I whispered into the calm Ramirez and Hayes were overwatching, ready to intervene, but their presence was secondary. This was my river, and I flowed alone. Inside, the rogue operatives had the 2 field agents restrained, fear etched into their faces. I didn't waste a moment. 1 quick sweep of the corridor, a silent neutralization of the nearest guard, and I guided the agents into cover. The river's rhythm was in my veins, each movement fluid, each breath controlled. Then the alarms tripped, an unforeseen patrol rounding the west side. I froze, calculating. 1 wrong step, and the mission, the agents, the river itself could betray me. But years of training, years of flowing through unseen currents, had prepared me for this. I used the shadows, the walls, and the panic in the guards' eyes to my advantage. 2 shots, 2 down, and I slipped the agents further into the building. Cole's voice broke the silence. Extraction is inbound. Helicopters are in position, but hold tight until you confirm the target secured. I nodded to myself. The river's lessons had brought me this far, but precision now demanded patience. The remaining guards were predictable. I neutralized them in quick succession, one by one, flowing like water around every obstacle, every threat. By the time the helicopters descended, the agents were free, and the rogue operatives were either unconscious or contained. The water had been my shield, my guide, and my ally. Every movement, every calculation had led to this moment. Back at Fort Cascadia, the debrief was quieter than before, subdued by the recognition of danger narrowly avoided. The agents had been recovered unharmed. The rogue network dismantled. The river had flowed, and so had I. Lawson handed me the mission report, but I barely glanced at it. The river outside my quarters whispered its familiar lesson, the same as it had on countless nights before. Respect the flow. Move with it. Learn from it. Later, I walked along the riverbank, the mist curling around my boots, and called my sister. My nephew's excited voice answered. "Aunt Harper, did you save them all?" "Yes, little warrior. Everyone's safe," I said, smiling through the exhaustion. "And soon, I'll teach you how to move through rivers like I do." I sat in silence for a moment, listening to the water. The currents were strong tonight, swift and unforgiving, yet patient and guiding. They reminded me that my life would always follow this path, flowing through darkness, striking when necessary, vanishing when the danger passed. The river shade was more than a call sign. It was a way of moving through the world, silent, precise, unstoppable. The lessons of my grandfather, the rivers of South Dakota, the icy canals of Zarov and Curacan, they all lived inside me. They would guide me wherever the next mission took me. And as night fell, I traced my fingers through the flowing water, letting the current wash away the tension, the cold, the fatigue. The river had carried me again, and it always would. I would continue to flow. I would continue to strike. And the river would remember, because that is what the river shade does.